Hello, welcome to episode 4 of the Cafe Genius Impresarios. Yes, that is spelled deliberately. I like extra letters in my words. And today we have Della with 2 L's, Della Rucker, with many letters after her name, which we'll get into. But Della Rucker, welcome to episode 4, my second guest. Very exciting.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I'm excited to get a chance to be here.
As am I. And I will. I do want to start with what those letters are after name: AICP and CEcD.
Sure.
CEcD, yeah, and some other stuff like how we ended up meeting and our very long emails and whatnot. So let's and I
I
think we
figured that
talked for
out.
about an hour. The first time we spoke on the phone, never having met, just
Mhm.
emails, and we talked for at least an hour. So I think we'll be
Yeah,
okay today.
absolutely. Yeah,
So
I'm not concerned in the least. So yeah, so I'm a very weird bird. I have kind of a career path that looks like cooked spaghetti is what I tell people a lot of times. Um, but those letters after my name indicate that I'm a certified urban planner
cool.
and that I'm a certified economic developer. And so AICP is the American Institute of Certified Planners. God, I should have looked that up before I got on this. The CEcD is Certified Economic Developer. So one comes from one organization, one comes from the other organization. They're both sort of the top, the kind of gold standard certification in those industries. And very few people are stupid enough to try to maintain both of them. And I've been doing that now for about a dozen years because the overlap between them in terms of what they require and what you have to do to get recertified and all of that ball of wax, there's a little overlap, but not much. So it's kind of like walking between different worlds. But to be honest, a lot of my career has been about having a foot in one world and having a foot in another, and my left hand in a third one, and trying to find the points of integration, the points of opportunity between them. And that came to a great extent out of the fact that I couldn't find solutions to the questions, to the issues that I really wanted to solve in any one of those alone.
Hmm. And I mean, some of the stuff we'll talk about today probably will make it clear that actual, well, especially in a locality, a city planning and economies and entrepreneurial ecosystems all fit together anyway. So
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
that you are a subject matter expert in all of these things is will come in handy over the next year or 10. So that's good.
Well, that's the hope. That's the hope.
And so we met thanks to Christina Aldan, and that
Nice
came
indeed.
from you being downtown project proximal. So we'll talk
Mm-hmm.
about that more later, but that's how we met.
Mm-hmm.
And we did talk for like an hour and stuff,
Mm-hmm.
which we'll probably get to again today. So so just a little backstory, a little bio. So Wise Economy Workshop
Mm-hmm.
is that your, would you call that your day job or in that parlance?
So I have kind of
Like,
two day jobs these
well,
days.
yeah, I was going to get to Trep House also. So
Right. So in terms of quote unquote day job, I sort of split my time, the lion's share of it between Trep House and Wise Economy, and I'll explain Wise Economy in a minute. I've got a
sure.
few other things that I sort of are involved with that are also, to use your word, proximate to those two, but starts to get really complicated. Um, so yeah, Wise Economy is it's a content platform and a consulting practice that I've had for about a dozen years now. That came about because I had been working in conventional urban planning and in conventional economic development. And the questions that I really wanted to answer, like I said, didn't seem to be adequately addressed by either of those. I also had a background in downtown revitalization and historic preservation. Those, it was like all of this stuff is part of the answer, but none of it is individually.
Hmm.
So, so I started Wise Economy Workshop really to try to figure out what those solutions were. And the big question that has been driving me for certainly for the last 20 years has been, how do we create, support, empower communities and people, the people who make up those communities, to be fully who they're capable of being, and more particularly to be able to thrive individually and as communities, regardless of what's going on in the national or global economy.
Right.
So I often joke that I had a front row seat for the collapse of the Industrial Revolution. I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, at a time when the traditional businesses that had made places like Cleveland or Detroit or Buffalo or that whole piece of the world, the industries that had made those places thrive all very quickly collapsed.
Mm-hmm.
And my grandfather and my father ran a paint factory that was a casualty of that collapse. So when I say front row seat, I was on the front row. And I then got to watch and live through the 80s the repercussions of that sort of economic disaster. And since then, I've seen a lot of places that have gone through parallel experiences. So a big motivation and kind of my driving question is, how do we create communities and empower people to be able to thrive even when something like that is going on?
Sure.
And so
And
there's an economic dimension. There's also a sociological dimension. There's a personal dimension. There's all these different pieces, parts that play into that equation. So that's been kind of the overarching of my work and my motivation for certainly the last dozen years, if not before.
I think we felt that in Vegas in particular. I mean, everybody did, but in Vegas, since they're so dependent on tourism and the tourist economy, hospitality and whatnot, the pandemic is definitely a bright light reminder, and which is driving some of the things that we'll talk about later after we talk about entrepreneurial ecosystems in general. But anyway, so Trep House, though, let's on to that.
Yeah. So Trep House is, I'm the chief operating officer of Trep House. Trep House is a virtual platform, a virtual super hub that's specifically designed for what we call new majority founders. So these are people who are typically Black, also Indigenous, Latina and Latino, people who are coming from backgrounds that have been historically left out of the opportunities to do entrepreneurship. And in this context, we don't differentiate between the person who wants to open a local restaurant and the person who's developing an app. I know there's technical differentiations, but from what I had seen in my practice and what our CEO, Kemo Agutera, has lived, there are so many ways in which Black populations particularly, but also people who are coming from other kinds of underrepresented or underappreciated backgrounds get left out of the opportunity to build wealth and to build personal agency and community agency through entrepreneurship. And so Kemo read some of the work that I had developed and reached out to me. He happens to only live an hour away from me. And so over the course of a couple of years, we started collaborating. Trep House was his vision from day one. And to this point, we've got probably 8 people who are involved in day to day operations. And I'm the only white person. I am the only person who is older than our usual demographic, which is millennial Gen Z. I'm very solidly Gen X.
Yeah, me
And
too.
yeah, exactly. Um, but it has been one of the best experiences of my life. So if anybody's interested in that, Trep House is easy to find. It's trephouse.co, and we're in the process of doing a website upgrade, so things might look funky occasionally, but that's where that is. Um, so yeah, so that's Trep House does everything from entrepreneurship courses, so learning to be an entrepreneur, to more specialized training, to help with fundraising and fundraising preparedness, connection to vendors. But I think the most important thing that Trep House provides for that population is community. It's a sense of
Hmm.
not being isolated, not being crazy, even though everybody else in your family may be telling you that you're crazy. And it's the opportunity for folks to be themselves and to be in a culture and in a context that values them for everything that they are, so that they don't feel that they have to um, sort of code switch to deal with
Right.
a predominantly white population. Obviously there's times where that's necessary, but to give people a place where they can learn and grow and feel safe, um, we decided early on, and KMO felt really early on was a crucial piece of the whole equation.
Yeah, I agree. And when I worked for Intel, up
Mm-hmm.
until the other big layoff 6, 7 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
I was able to travel around and interact with at hackathons. So I
Mm-hmm.
developed products, and then I would go out and work with people of all ages using them. And it didn't. I mean, there was a pretty good diversity of people. However, always fewer women. So
Yeah.
similarly, it was interesting to see, um, and as a result of a particular event at Mount Holyoke College, where
Mm-hmm.
they tried proactively to get a 50-50. I don't know how. I will speak generically and just say, both genders
Mm-hmm.
and leave it at that. But so they managed to do that, but the number of people who completed their hackathon project at the end of the weekend was still skewed. And I asked the professor that was
Mm-hmm.
driving it, and she said, well, there's just a thing, the environment. It's about imposter syndrome, maybe, or just
Mm-hmm.
confidence, or so I really, it was really eye opening for me. I never really thought about um,
Mm-hmm.
showing up is not the whole thing. And
Yeah.
so I mean that probably extends because, like I said, it was fairly diverse in ethnicities, cultural, and whatnot. But
Mm-hmm.
the gender part was a challenge, and it continues to be. And it's still
Absolutely.
something to work with. But yeah,
Yeah.
I agree completely.
Absolutely.
Safe spaces.
Yeah, and in tech, I mean, we know the number of women. I don't know it off the top of my head, but it's been documented, the number of women who start out in a STEM program and then drop out of a STEM program, or
Yep.
go into a STEM career and leave STEM careers relatively early and go a different direction. And I think that's an enormous, enormous challenge. I again, I'm on the older side for this space, but I was I'm much better at math and science than I ever gave myself credit for being as a kid. I closed myself out of those opportunities as a kid because it didn't come quite as easily to me as some other things like writing. And I think I kind of got the tacit message that you're a girl. You're a girl.
Right.
You don't really need to do this. On the other hand, I know amazing women in STEM. You know, Heather Wild being an example that we all know.
Right.
Um, But yeah, that was that. Even back then, it was a particularly lonely road. My understanding is it's still kind of that way these today as well.
Yeah.
So,
My other thing I do for free, the other 24 hours a day, is the Innovate for Vegas Foundation, and we
hmm
have drastically male turnout, and
yeah.
again in the simplest version of that label, but the there are some number of women have expressed interest, or I just want to keep it simple. Don't get in trouble. Don't make me get in trouble for not using gender properly. But I'm just saying more people should be involved. But there still seems to be this barrier. And even after we change the name to Innovate for Vegas to prevent the, I'm not a coder, therefore I'm not
hmm
welcome. Code for Vegas. But we're trying to really push creative inputs for any non-coders. But
hmm
the reach is still only getting to the usual demographics, and
Yeah.
I would, and here's another, I mean, another challenge was I definitely reached out to a number of people to participate as board members, advisors, and
hmm
other ways, and it was always either no answer or I'm not really. So there wasn't this
hmm
eagerness to participate, and I get a little bit more eagerness, if that's a word,
hmm
um, from the other half, I guess we'll say. But
hmm
yeah, it's a frustrating journey because I think, as you say, it happened early. The Chinese saying about the tree, right? So
hmm
the best time to get more people involved in STEM is 50 years ago or whatever, but the second best time is now.
right.
And but really the programming of kids to think that they can't do the things that they love because of one thing or another, I think is a travesty. If you discount the great ideas of half of your population, you're not going to be around very long. So
Amen. Amen.
yeah.
And, you know, I got interested in, so I've had about a dozen years worth of more tangential experience working with populations that have been left out of uh, the big questions of innovation and entrepreneurship and technology driven innovation and all of this kind of stuff. And one of the things that I've been really coming to learn and appreciate and understand more recently is just how much of a burden somebody who is a leader in an unrepresented population's participation in a given industry, whether you're a black entrepreneur or you're a woman in high technology, etc. You're fighting a constant battle. You feel that you've got to prove to be better. You've got to prove yourself to be, you know, absolutely top of the line at all times, and you have this pressure to be an example
Yeah.
and to be a model. And the number part of the reason why I am the chief operating officer at Trep House as a Gen X white woman is because I had the flexibility and the capacity, just the personal capacity, the mental capacity to take on that job. You know, it's a startup. We're not making hardly any, we weren't making hardly any money, blah, blah, blah. The black people in our circles who, you know, could have easily done that job and probably in many ways done it better than I, they had full-time, almost uniformly full-time jobs, their own side consulting, a nonprofit that they're running, and helping their niece get through college. And you look at it and you go, when do you sleep? But that's what they have to do. And so once I understood that, it was like, okay. It gave me a whole new appreciation, um, and a little bit of awe of people who are in that position of being a leader in diversifying their space. I've probably been a leader in diversifying some spaces, but I'm pretty dense and I wasn't aware of it. But it's a big burden to carry. And so that's the conclusion I came to, is the more we can do, the more I can do as a, I don't really like the word allies become kind of messed up, but the more I can do to help those populations and sort of leverage what I can bring for them to be able to step forward and thrive, I've really come to the conclusion that that's one of the best uses of what I have to bring to the table that I can put forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, ally, friend, community, these are words that are often thrown around so much they lose
Mm-hmm.
their actual meanings.
Yeah.
But I mean, yeah, I I think just recognizing that there are so many people with good ideas
Mm-hmm.
or inspiration or insights. Sometimes, you can look through history and see that have been significant and substantial discoveries and developments of methodologies and whatnot. They didn't say, "Oh, you're a male person, therefore your idea counts." And like, you
Mm-hmm.
can look at the famous ones: Ada Lovelace, Marie Curie, and the
Absolutely.
list goes on and on and on. So yeah, I hope we get to the point someday when it's like, oh, you have a good idea. It doesn't really matter what else is going on.
Yeah.
Good ideas are welcome. So
Yeah. One of the amazing things to me, when I was very young, I encountered the work on scientific paradigms. I believe it's Thomas Kuhn. I should have looked that up because I didn't think I'd bring that up today. Um, and names don't stick in my head. So it's like, oh, who is that? Okay. Um, but invariably, if you look at that stuff, that research, in it, the truly groundbreaking innovations going back hundreds and hundreds of years almost invariably came from somebody who was outside of the standard paradigm. So somebody who is observing, I don't have a good example off the top of my head, but if you look through that history of scientific paradigms, that scientific philosophy, it more times than not, the big breakthroughs came from somebody who had an experience, had expertise that was completely different from what the main line was saying, because they weren't in the box that traditional scientists of that discipline were in. They didn't live within those assumptions, so they could see other possibilities. And I
yep,
see that all the time when we work with people who are of these underrepresented populations, that because they're seeing challenge X in from a profoundly different point of view, they bring something entirely new to the situation. I'm going to let me give a quick example of that. So I mentioned that the CEO of Trep House is named Kamo Ahakatera, and I can spell that. You've got that in other materials.
yep.
Um,
There are links to all the stuff in the show notes, by the way, anybody listening. So
okay,
Trep House
awesome.
and all that. Yep.
Yeah. So Kamo, at roughly the same time as, this is, endemic to entrepreneurs, right? They can never just do one thing. They do like, four of them at once. Um, he also started a company called Design to Build. And Design to Build is a type of construction that people in Las Vegas are very familiar with, which is out of shipping containers.
Mm-hmm.
But the difference here, and he's not the only one doing this, but he put a very unique spin on this, is that Design to Build is designed specifically to address affordable housing and um, temporary housing for people who are experiencing homelessness and disaster response by using manufacturing systems to create modular buildings that can be very small, can have multiple units. There are a ton of different designs. And a lot of people have thought of using containers because they're, they've got this cool industrial look, or it's like Legos the way you put them together, or whatever. But I think you had to come from Camo's experience and Camo's background in order to look at that technology and say, this is a way to solve problems that are important to my community that I have seen lived firsthand. And that's the kind of thing that is so important to when we have broader, is so much the reason why we need broader involvement in innovation, in entrepreneurship, in technology, in this world of creating new things and new ideas. It's because I would have never thought of that.
Right. Right.
Camo could.
And this is common. I've been an engineer for 30 years, and it never ceases to amaze me how often I hear, why would somebody want to, fill in the blank? So like, yes, you sitting in your cubicle surely know how all of your users will be using this thing.
Amen.
So once I came across the actual practice of co-creation, or actually going out into the world and working with or sitting next to the people that your intended audience are, right? And the example I always give, so if you're listening and you've heard this before, too bad. I always say, if you cook somebody a meal and they come to your home or wherever, and you cook some victuals and you put it down on the table and they taste it, what's the very first question you ask? How is it?
Oh, that right? I was trying to think as the person eating the food.
Oh no, you have made something,
right?
So often people don't actually get to or don't think to. So they build products, they come up with urban plans, they come up with economic development, and then they're like, should we ask anybody what they think of this? Nope.
Exactly.
So actual lived experience is part of the whole deal. So the co-creation stuff is a good idea.
And I get in trouble with economic development and urban planning people all the time for disrespecting the lip service that they give to getting quote unquote community buy-in or community feedback or stakeholder engagement or something like that. Because in that universe, so often they're kind of scared to talk to the public, in part because nobody's taught them how to do that, believe it or not. And so they kind of do whatever they're being required to do to check the box. But when you actually, and this was a big piece of my urban planning life, was doing extensive public engagement. So I would do basically workshops with community members. Sometimes people use the word charrette. I'm not an architect, so that's not technically the right word, but it's that kind of basic idea if people are familiar with what that is. But around concepts and kind of design, less about design characteristics and more about what do you want your community to be like overall. And that's a really pretty hard sell for some folks who are used to being the experts, and there's a safety. There's a sense of security in being the expert and not feeling like you have to go ask a bunch of the great unwashed. But very often they're the ones who have the insight that makes all the difference. And I think that's universal across discipline, at least from what I have seen. And that's part of why I so enjoy working in entrepreneurship, because that has become so much part of the ethos that you go out and you test and you ask and you try.
Absolutely. And the unwashed masses, I use that a lot. And when I say it, I kind of feel like I'm not trying to insult people. It's literally just means the populace. And they don't have the luxury of sitting in a cubicle with the person designing the thing that they're going to be cursing about later. Why does this phone not work? But yeah, and it is that divide. And and the best the best, whether it's actually starting companies, entrepreneurialism, or just people who take the time, even if it's food, even if it's,
Mhm.
and I have a food truck thing. So food
You
truck
have a
owners
food
are,
truck thing?
I've enjoyed food trucks. I've been the
Okay.
director of owners associations. I've worked on food
Mm.
trucks. I've organized events. I have software that I never finished because thanks pandemic for kind of
Mhm.
squashing everything. But to me, that's in the food business. That's about as close to talking to the customers every day as you're going to get, right? And I know
Yeah.
food truck owners that
Mhm.
that's why they do it, because they get to talk
Mhm.
to people in all different places. And I always say that the owner of this restaurant is on the other side of this very thin sheet metal. If you want
Yes,
to ask a
indeed.
question, they're right there, right? So those, they're not the back of the back of the house is the front of the house, essentially. So they,
Exactly. It's a good way to put it.
and so that extends to, like I said, all the engineering stuff I've worked on, and I have this eventually someday project, um, to try to co-create assistive technologies and devices that we will all need, some sooner than others, but
Mhm.
basically, you try to speak to your Amazon smart speaker product and it's like, it didn't work. Well, imagine if you have an
Mhm.
injury or some other situation that limits that. But we have the technology to make those products better. You just, as we are recording this in March 2023, the Google Glass has just been discontinued, and I always tell people that
Mhm.
that product 10 years ago could identify American currency from the camera. So if you
Really?
can't see, and our money is all the same size and shape and all that, so I think we're like one of the only countries in the world that does that, if that's still true.
Mhm. Yeah.
So you could use this technology to function with our modern currencies and whatnot. So they're canceling that probably because it was just not cool, but it is in the life changing technology space, and nobody appreciates that until they need it. And then suddenly, oh man, I wish
Absolutely.
I could identify which money I have in my pocket.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's the more you know your users and your customers, and that just applies to everything, right? So
Oh, yeah.
get out into
Yeah.
the world. And so on the ground entrepreneurialism is
Mhm.
about the best. It's my favorite. That's why local entrepreneurs are more interesting than the people that want to, like, I want 100 million customers. Well, why don't you try to work really well with one first?
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. And
So
in non-tech, that's the advice that we give people, right? It's
yeah.
hone your product with these 10. But how do you sustain, the question of how you do that and you sustain it, that gets people hung up. But man, yeah, you learn so much in
Well,
that context.
right. And something that I want to, for some reason, this, as far as I know, does not exist here in Las Vegas. But I don't know if anybody knows this, but we have a lot of people coming to visit here. So
Hmm.
the
Possibly.
population of Southern Nevada is something like 2.3 million. I think Las
Hmm.
Vegas proper is about less than 600,000 according to the census, but say
Hmm.
600,000 people. But our
Yeah.
tourism rate is something like 40 to 50 million, depending on which day you look at which numbers. But it's a
Hmm.
lot of people every year coming here. And that's a lot of people to expose to a new idea or technology or method, or say you're developing an
Yeah.
assistive technology that could be life changing to, the 2% of people that visit here that would otherwise not experience it. Right. So there's
Yeah.
all kinds of opportunities to actually get out and talk to people directly or engage and interact and get feedback. And they're coming to you, or they're coming to us, I should
Yeah.
say. So
Yeah.
that's on
And
my list of to-dos, is to enable that more.
awesome. Two things. Number one is that's like tourism industries, and of course, Las Vegas is the Uber tourism agent industry, or tourism economy rather.
Hmm.
There's lots of tourism, places that are very dependent on tourism in the U.S. And worldwide. Las Vegas obviously is kind of a creature unto itself in that space. But two things that you triggered thinking about that. Number one is that's we talk sometimes about the difficulties of a tourism based economy. It doesn't inherently grow certain kinds of high paying jobs. There can be a tendency to consolidation, like you see in the casino industry, in in Las Vegas and places like the Maldives. Um, but you also have this incredible opportunity to, yeah, really have the world come to you, like you said. And that's a growth opportunity. Not necessarily because you're going to attract those people like come and live here, although some very much will.
That's another story that we'll get to later, but yeah.
Right, exactly. The other thing is, and I think this is an asset that Las Vegas has, and we haven't talked about the downtown project yet, but um, people, because Las Vegas is culturally so focused on, community customer service, there's the word I want, and on, and has this, historically heavily transient population.
Yes.
I have never, any place else that I've ever been, and I've been in large cities, small cities, all over the country, I never met people who were as immediately friendly and open as in Las Vegas. And that to me continues to be sort of the defining cultural characteristic of Las Vegas for me, is I've never been in a place. I'm a Midwesterner. If you haven't been here for 3 generations, I'm still kind of looking at you a little bit sideways. But in Las Vegas, in 10 minutes, I can make a new friend for life. And I know that's grossly oversimplified and not always the case and everything like that, but there's a definite, that's a uniqueness to the experience of Las Vegas, especially when we start talking about downtown Las Vegas, but also I've encountered that in other parts of the region as well. That's special. That's really special. I'm going to Philadelphia next week, and I assure you that it will not feel like that. I'm going to Cleveland in a couple of weeks. Cleveland is my birthplace, and it will not feel like that. So,
Are you familiar with
pretty awesome.
the nice versus kind comparison between, say, New York and San Francisco, or LA? Probably San Francisco more.
Oh yeah. Oh
So
yeah.
I almost wonder, because especially when it comes to driving here, you just never know if somebody's going to try to cut you off or they're going to let you in.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of wonder if it's the similar, like the hybridization of so much transient population,
Yeah.
people coming and going, plus the visitors. And like I always there, I sold my car 6 or 7 years ago. So I'm totally committed to our transit system and all of its failings. And so
Whoa.
whenever I'm, that's a whole long story about our open transit project for but the take home, which I learned in my travels for Intel, for all these hackathons, when I never rented cars, I would always take public transit, whether it was a bus or
Mm-hmm.
sometimes, a Lyft or an Uber, but I
Mm-hmm.
tried as much as possible to take local public transit, because you really, first of all, they know where you're going, and I didn't always know where I was going. So,
That's
so
true.
uh, in Italy, just get on the train and it ends up by the Maker Faire, great, and so on.
Yeah.
So, but you get to talk to people, and they're always helpful. There's
Mm-hmm.
always, like, you just show them a picture or try to figure, and they'll point you in the right direction. And I do the same here,
Mm-hmm.
because you never know. And the tourists are, they're just normal people, and they come here and they're just trying to get from A to B, and you're like, oh, I know where that is, just get on. And if they don't speak English, then there's a lot of pointing at things. Luckily they have a
Mm-hmm.
picture or a map on their phone. But yeah, it's in my experience, I guess I'm one of the nice people you might encounter, but I do try to help people. Maybe it's like a karma thing, because I am from New Jersey, but I did live in Silicon Valley, so I have the nice and
Yeah.
kind split. Maybe, I don't know,
Yeah.
or
Well,
maybe neither. I don't know. Somebody
in
else will
in
have to judge me.
oh yeah, in the Midwest, we refer to Midwest nice, and the stereotype is like the 3 hour goodbye, and the, watch out for deer when you leave, somebody leaves your house, that kind of thing. Um, but there's still, beneath that, there's still a little bit of a unsureness about strangers that, again, maybe I was fortunate, but I've experienced so much less of that unsureness about strangers in Las Vegas than I have in a lot of other places. So maybe it's I think the mix of nice and kind is a really good way to put it. It might also be just developing the muscle, as it were, from the comfort level with dealing with people who are not embedded in your own culture and your own background.
Sure, sure. Well, I mean,
But
hospitality is right there in our at the top of the list of economic
yeah,
drivers, right? So
yep.
we have to be good at it, I guess. But no, I think
And
you're
it's
right, and it's
it's an
something.
asset.
Oh,
That's
I was going to
definitely
say
an asset.
it's something we should leverage. Yes, exactly, just as you said. So, um, and I just want to mention real quick that you have a couple of books, which I like the
Mhm.
titles already, but so everybody innovates here, which I'm hoping to drive with Innovate for Vegas in our innovation district at the
Awesome.
Innovation Center, et cetera, et cetera. So, and then the local
Mhm.
economy revolution has arrived, which it certainly seems to be once again in Vegas. So
Yes,
those
indeed.
two books are they available generally for the world?
Yeah. Yeah, I think if you Google those two titles, especially if you put the name Della attached to it, you don't even have to remember that my last name's Rucker. Um, that's I hated having a name like that when I was a kid, but now it comes in really handy.
Sure.
Should be able to come up with that. You can get them from bookshop.org or Amazon or wherever you want to
Okay.
get your books.
All right. So yeah, those are also in the show notes being next to wherever you grab this podcast file or audio file. So that'll be in there. And then so we're still not going to get to the downtown project yet. That's going to be towards the end because I definitely want to talk about entrepreneurial ecosystems. But so I have told people that you were around because I'm not exactly sure like how many minutes you spent downtown. I always tell people that I was more of a spectator. So
Mm-hmm.
my travel schedule was such that my weekends were Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, essentially. So I was
Mm,
always around downtown, but mostly I was not. So what was
understood.
your exposure? And then we'll get to some general stuff and
So
end
I
on
was
our experience here.
Sure. So I was, when it came to the downtown project, I was also, I would say, very much an observer. And that was partly reality. I didn't live in Las Vegas. I came during that time period. I probably came to Las Vegas once every 6 months or something like that, probably at most. Um, I had I still have people who were connected to the downtown project that I love and appreciate. We've mentioned Christina Aldan, um, but for me it was completely fascinating as an observer of the downtown project because of where I was coming from. So by that point, I had, not to blow my own horn, but I pretty much had mastery of the conventional tools and resources in urban planning, in economic development, and particularly my kind of one of my core areas has always been the question of downtown revitalization. I grew up a couple of blocks off of a small downtown. I watched that crash that was so endemic to so many of our central commercial districts. And even though I've struggled for years to describe why that matters, it clearly matters. And so when I first found out about the downtown project, it was reading about the container park. And this was before the container park had been built. And so I remember being out on vacation. We had taken my kids the standard Easterner thing where you have to do the obligatory tour of the southwestern national parks. We had done that when my kids are now in their 20s. They were in like middle school, high school at the time. And I peeled away one night to go to a very early downtown podcast. And you and I talked about this online the other day.
Mm-hmm.
And this was way back when it was in, like, the Ogden was still mostly empty. and it was some unused apartment on the high up on the upper floors. The container park at that point, I went out there and I'd seen the renderings and everything like that. But at that point, it was a geodesic dome and I think a super long container standing on end, and that was it.
Oh.
on a dusty vacant lot. But I went to that podcast, and the room's full, and I met Christina and Heather, who I think we've also mentioned there,
Yep.
and a bunch of other people. And it was a fabulous, fabulous environment. And I felt, like I said, so welcome, even though I was not, quote unquote, one of them. I was older. I was not a tech person, so I knew I was odd bird out, but I was so welcome regardless. And that kind of hooked me. And so over the course of the next few years, as the downtown project in, sort of its phase one was under development, I would go whenever I could, but I was also paying attention real closely online. So I was following, everything that was going on via Twitter or Facebook or whatever we were using at that point in time. And the piece that was most important to me was that was one of the first times that I had ever seen a group of people who started out with the perspective of, we're going to revitalize this part of the city that has been largely ignored, left out, and is going to pot. And I don't mean pot marijuana. I mean, it was going, going to pieces.
Yep. Yep.
We're gonna work on this. We're gonna work on the physical side and the business side at the same time. And that sounds really sort of like Captain Obvious, maybe, but I had seen so many downtown revitalization projects that focused on the physical and never touched the getting businesses. Like the number of beautifully cleaned up streets that I've seen with lovely old storefronts and brick pavers and ornamental lights and hanging baskets, and absolutely nobody in the buildings or on the streets. It's that was my frame of reference. And so for me, the downtown project's approach, especially when it came to the small business side, I kind of knew the tech side, but not as well. And I think arguably the tech side wasn't as, it didn't achieve the results that I think those folks were hoping for.
I would agree.
But what I saw on the small business side, so Chef Natalie with Eat and the container park and all of these things, it was a little bit transformative. It was a little bit mind-blowing for me as a conventional urban planner / economic developer from the eastern half of the U.S. But caveat, I purposely never met Tony Hsieh. I mean, I think I said hello to him in an elevator at some point. And I had people who were very, very tight with him.
Yep.
I could have gotten an interview with him. And I was toying at the time and still toy with the idea of doing a book on kind of what I saw and what I was learning. And of course, now having, some time having gone under the bridge since then, I think, it's a different perspective. But I purposely wasn't close to the sort of the central people. I purposely kept my distance from that because I didn't want to be swayed by their vision any more than I had to. I wanted to see what was going on. But
yeah, and that's very. Sorry. That's very similar to the co-creation idea, right? Like the closer you are to the people doing stuff, the better sense you have, in my opinion, than if you sit up in the in the high castle or in the penthouse, or if you're too
Mhm.
far removed, then you suffer from what's that social psych thing where you protect each other from reality. You just reinforce each
Yeah,
other's what you think is happening. So yeah, I prefer to be closer to. So yeah, sorry to interrupt,
yeah.
but
No, no, no,
definitely.
no, no. That's exactly it. And what I saw playing out, um, especially when it came to the things like how they used buildings that weren't being that didn't have a commercial use yet. So the early Life is Beautiful installations, um, the the uses of the container park. There, I have some critique, um, but there was so much that I felt like was really good in there, and unfortunately, I'm not paying attention as closely as I used to. I feel like they made what is, from an economic standpoint, a very logical shift to sort of focus more on the real estate development side. Um, that's largely what organizations comparable to Downtown Project do across the country. A little bit of variation on the theme, but not as groundbreaking. But I think the Downtown Project was able to be groundbreaking because it goes back to people coming in from an outside perspective. Now the downside is that I think some of the people who are coming in from an outside perspective perhaps didn't remain open to um, kind of hearing from other outside perspectives in a
Right.
really co-creation kind of way, to use, and that's a term that I absolutely adore. um, so I think that, and that's part of the risk when you go from being the outsider to the insider, right? So the question of maintaining um, that openness to new stimuli and new ideas, and to not get stuck on things like, I set a particular timeline, the lawyer says I have to do it this way, kind of thing. That becomes really important when you're trying to create something that's truly, truly innovative. But anybody who's been around there can see, I mean, the difference between the downtown Las Vegas area, when I first saw it, probably pre Downtown Project in like 2007 or something like that, to now, it's kind of mind blowing.
It's certainly. I when I moved here in 2000, August of 2013, I somehow. So my downtown project. I'm sorry, downtown podcast experience. Because I had a podcast network of sorts in Silicon Valley, Radio
Mm-hmm.
Sunnyvale, and then when I moved here, I had a house fire, so I was like, oh, might as well move to Vegas. So I, so I moved to
You
Vegas.
moved to Vegas because you had a house fire? Oh
Yeah,
my
that was
lord.
that was an interesting exit of the Silicon Valley scene. It had just I had lived in the same place for so long that I had no sense of how expensive rent really was. So when I
Yeah.
because they never I lived in a little duplex by the train station. I used to take the train up to the city to work and whatnot. So
Mhm.
when after the fire, that's always a good beginning or end of a story. I looked around from it was April 8th, I think it was, of 2013 until
Mm.
July. Came out to Vegas, checked out like which neighborhoods or whatever, and August 1st moved into a place, and then come November, I was looking around online and see, what is it? What's the job market? What am I going to do here? Silicon Valley software engineer for however long. So I
Mhm.
stumbled upon the downtown podcast and you can see, you can go to a live recording. Okay. So I went down there,
Mhm.
quietly sat off to the side, watched what was going on. Probably Christina was there. I remember seeing her early on. And then I went to a show, a recording, and Pavel, if you remember Pavel,
Mm.
needed some
Mhm.
help with the camera. He said, "Hey, do you know how to work a camera?" I said, "Yeah, I actually used to do podcast, blah blah blah." And quick intro, and then talk
Mhm.
to Dylan, talk to Suze. She goes by Suze now, I think. So
Oh, okay.
Suze Hinton and to
Mhm.
all the whole gang and Jackie and everybody, and then slowly but surely started meeting people, and And so just as you say, people are very nice here and whatnot. So it was very easy to talk to people and run into people. And downtown, it was very almost like a college campus, right? Like, oh, hey,
Mm-hmm.
hey, Lisa, hey, Dylan, hey, son, and other Dylan, and third Dylan, and all that.
Yeah.
So
Like a very small college campus.
sure, but
Yeah.
a lot of stuff going on. But the moment I got my job offer to work for Intel, and then coincidentally, there was a magazine article that had come out, like what powered the success of Silicon Valley. It was three educational institutions: Berkeley, Stanford, and Harvey Mudd College. And I was like, what? So
Huh.
I so I'm here in Vegas. I moved to Vegas from Silicon Valley. I graduated from Harvey Mudd College forever ago,
Mm-hmm.
30 years ago now, and I'm just starting to work as the only Intel employee in Nevada. So I got a lot of attention.
Hmm.
And so I was able to meet a lot of people and talk to a lot of people and have meetings with people. And it was a very interesting time from 2014 for a couple of years, and then the big
Yeah.
layoffs from Intel. So, but during that time, I learned a lot about what did work and what did not,
Mm-hmm.
based on my observations. And that's why I'm excited when we get down to the retrospective and whatnot. But so that's a little teaser. So before we get there, um, I think it's important to talk about ecosystems, because I think
Mm-hmm.
people throw that term around also. And I think they believe that you can just sprinkle some magic dust on some ground and it turns into an ecosystem. And I think it's substantially more complicated than that. And Las Vegas is a great example of that.
Mm-hmm.
So, what is an entrepreneurial ecosystem? And then we'll get down to the downtown project, I promise.
Oh no, yeah,
But
no, we go where you want to go. Um, so, and actually, that book you mentioned, the book "Everybody Innovates" here. That book actually has a like half of it is about the process of if not building, then understanding and analyzing an ecosystem. And so the interesting thing, and you and I have talked about this before. So part of the conversation around Downtown Project was around community and the importance of community. And Tony Hsieh said very publicly that he had gotten that from a book by Edward Glaser, who is an economist, where Glaser identified the means of generating value in a place like New York City as being a result of the fact that you could meet people and run into people and develop working relationships with people from who were doing all sorts of fascinating, interesting things if you had a location where those people wanted to be. That like being in that location was kind of like an engine for creating innovation. And innovation in this case meaning corporate innovation or startup, or it's just the process of creating new products and services and things. So ecosystem is a little bit entrepreneurial ecosystem is a little more sophisticated understanding than that, because it turns out that we could have collisions, and sometimes people get dumb lucky and just happen to sit next to on the couch next to somebody who ends up being a collaborative of theirs for decades and decades. But very often we don't.
right,
And so if you think about a natural ecosystem, so let's take one that's familiar to your listeners, Red Rocks. And if you look at that environment, and if you're you're an ecologist, or you're an ecological engineer, or you're an environmental scientist, you see how the different pieces interrelate with each other. So because of the chemical nature of the stone and the way it weathers, certain plants grow there that I can't find in southern Ohio. Like they don't occur here, because it's a different environment. Those plants are then food for certain kinds of animals. Those animals, other animals eat them. Some animals eat the animals that have died, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We can all picture kind of what that type of ecosystem looks like. And ecosystems are unique to a place. So
right.
if you take that and you apply it as an analogy to the question of innovation, part of the point that I was making in that book is that if you want to grow a healthy ecosystem on the environmental side, you don't just take a bunch of seeds and like random stuff that you got at Home Depot and throw them into a pile and think something's going to happen. Because you might get a few plants growing and one might work and one might die, but maybe an animal shows up or maybe it doesn't. It's not haphazard. So
Serendipitous agriculture.
yeah, I don't think serendipitous. I mean, I'm all in favor of seed bombing places that are monocultures, but
Yeah.
that's not quite the same thing. So to have an effective entrepreneurial ecosystem, especially if it's going to be effective for those people who've been historically left out of the equation, it needs to have a lot of different functions. So in the book, I call them pumps and pipes. And the pumps are, in that analogy, are different kinds of organizations or programs. So you need to have a place where people can be learning to be entrepreneurs. You need to have places where people can connect to other people who are entrepreneurs. This informed the way we structured Trep House a lot. But you also have to have organization. You have to have places that can house a lot of these different organizations and help them be in proximity to each other. So again, collision wasn't completely wrong. It was just incomplete. So places
Right.
where you can at least have the stage setting for that are important. One of the ones that I talk about in that book, I termed a switchboard operator, because so often people struggle to figure out where to go. Okay, I can't figure out how to do this thing, or I can't find this kind of supplier, or everybody in my family thinks that I'm psycho. I need somebody to understand. I need people who get me. And the switchboard operator becomes really important in helping people kind of find the right resources.
Right.
Again, if you're a privileged person, like that wasn't formally a part of how a Silicon Valley or a Route 128 in Boston, or the zillion innovation districts that have grown up since then. That isn't always a formal part of that, because if you're coming from a place of privilege, you've got the personal network, the networking skills, and you fit in, and so there's less barrier to finding the resources that you need. Where do I plug into this ecosystem? For people who are historically underrepresented, it needs to be, you can't just so much leave it to happenstance, because that's where
Yeah.
people can't find, can't connect, and so can't do.
Right. I agree. I would agree with that. I would, although I would say Silicon Valley is kind of a special case when it comes to that. Pardon me.
Yeah.
Excuse me. Is a special case, I think, because there was just so much rapid growth and thus rapid job growth that it just you almost try. And I always tell this story. I would come home from work back in the answering machine days, and the little blinking red light said, "Oh." So one person actually like arranged okay, you're meeting tomorrow at 9:00 with so. I'm like, who is this? So there was just jobs being thrown at people. So I think it's almost unfair to include that, because access to connectivity, to networking, to just falling into quote unquote communities was almost foisted upon people. And in other places you sort of have to look around, and you can't. And I like anybody who was in Silicon Valley during the boom knows that language and if you could sit in a chair and do what was needed to be done, you didn't really need to speak English as your first or second language, or there's a lot of things. So I think it's almost unfair to consider that. But the
Yeah,
serendipitous collision stuff, I always say it's nice, but it's not a business model. It's fun.
that's a good way to put it. It's nice. It's great when it happens.
Yeah.
It happens very rarely. It's kind of a unicorn situation, but it's not a business model. And there's and we've got some research on, that wasn't available when you were there, but there's research now that indicates that, you know women weren't getting those jobs, and people who were black and hadn't gone to the right school maybe weren't getting those jobs, maybe occasionally, because there was such demand. The key challenge really is, in my opinion, we talk all the time about this talent crunch that we're in. So it doesn't matter. I don't care whether you're a healthcare provider or creating AI. Everybody, everybody anymore is saying, I can't find the talent. And so that's an adjacent issue to entrepreneurship per se. But we leave so many people kind of behind.
Yes.
And we assume that, and again, this goes back to paradigms. Left to our own devices, a lot of us assume that a person who takes X job or a person who starts X company has to, if not look in terms of skin color, certainly look in terms of um, clothing choice, language style, background, etc., is going to look like this. And one of the core questions, and part of the reason why that book is called Everybody Innovates here, is that, to me, it's really a core tenet of the world going forward, or at least the world of innovation and problem solving, the stuff I'm interested in, is that we're going to have to include people who have not been part of those conversations, have not been part of that work in the past. Um, so that to me is a really crucial driver. And so the biggest reason why I push so hard anymore for ecosystems, for the system part, as opposed to the sort of, there's a bunch of stuff going on and it all kind of relates to each other and we go to the same meetups and it's cool kind of approach, is because so many people get left out. And people, if there's not some navigability to that
Right.
whole system, and people will push back on that and say like, oh, but we need it to be organic and we need it to be responsive and we need blah blah blah. Well, a natural ecosystem is responsive and reactive and can change, but it's a flexing of the relationships between the components, as opposed to just having a jumbled mess and hoping that you can fuddle your way through and figure it out. Because if you are coming from an underrepresented background, you very well may not have the time, the money, the emotional or personal capacity to do that fumbling around.
Right.
So making it a more effective ecosystem. We're not building those by ourselves anymore. I mean, those aren't occurring naturally, probably because we killed most of them in the 19th and early 20th centuries. But that's a really crucial piece to actually getting the level of entrepreneurship and innovation that I think we need.
Yeah, I agree. There, if so, to connect the ecological, there's nobody thinks about this so much, but it's a history and ecology lesson rolled into one. But
Mm-hmm.
the United States has a policy about finding islands of guano, bird poop,
Mm-hmm.
because of the phosphorus value for farming, for food supply. We will automatically go full imperialist and take it over. And Fun
We're good
fact:
at it.
the Ukraine is a major supplier of potassium-based fertilizer
Oh,
for growing food. So the importance of food supply and the ecological requirements to enable food supply are not always completely obvious. But
huh.
if you connect that with an entrepreneurial ecosystem, it's not always clear that well, they'll just figure it out.
Yeah.
And I call it the last mile problem, which we'll touch on for the
Mm-hmm.
downtown project stuff shortly. But the stuff we're doing now with my little roundtable, which we'll also touch on,
Mm-hmm.
we have Evelyn is here from Silicon Valley. She's looking at what do people do when they want to live here, but they don't have 2 years of pay stubs or so many months of
Mm.
rent in the bank. If you want to encourage a startup ecosystem or an entrepreneurial ecosystem, but you can't live here, then you can't ask people to move here and then wish them luck. And to
That's great.
Tony Hsieh's credit, there were housing options. You could live in the
Mm-hmm.
Ogden or the Jewel or other places, which I think was part of the Vegas Tech Fund deal.
Mm-hmm.
Was that you could just move into a place with your team and you could work on your
Yeah.
stuff. There was Startup Row in the Huntridge, which was several houses that somebody managed to lease near each other, and a bunch of people lived in
Mm-hmm.
those kind of communal co-work, co-live, which is, as Evelyn points out, which hopefully someday you'll meet her. There's a
Oh.
sense of community from living with people in a similar situation that are either they're your colleagues with your own adventure or they're doing something equally stressful and risky, and so you kind of feed off each other. But
Amen.
just
Yeah.
but just thinking of that stuff is is the soil, air, water, and tending. These are the components that people don't really think of. Just move to
Yeah.
Silicon Valley, it'll just happen. Well, that only happened because it was like 10 feet of topsoil to plant in. You didn't have anything to worry about. It was ridiculous. But I think here it's a little bit more of a challenge, and to just leave people to their own devices, because I will say there, I have spoken to people who graduate from college here, and then their
Mm-hmm.
first thought is to go where the jobs are. Say, well, why don't you stay here? Well, if I stay here and the job I have doesn't work out, is there another one? And that same goes for people who relocate here. That's exactly what they say. If it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't work out, what next? And if you go to a place like Austin or Silicon Valley, or
Mm-hmm.
there are other cities that are growing. If you go to Dublin, Ireland,
Yeah. Totally.
ridiculous. They're going nuts there, and Dubai and other. So there are a lot of places that are becoming job rich and entrepreneurial focus,
Mm-hmm.
and it takes more than just snapping the fingers and putting up a sign. I think so. That'll be interesting. So
Absolutely.
what
That's a
does
good way to
one
put it.
do? What does one do to make and I would argue that changing an ecosystem is not years, it's decades or generational, maybe. Like the energy, if you look at it as an energy argument, right, from an engineering perspective, a system is what it is, and to change the
Yeah.
system, it requires energy, forces
Enormous.
applied, and so on. So
Right.
what do you think about that? Like, is it a 5 year
Well,
affair or
it's probably at. I think it's going to depend a lot on, to use your analogy, the energy that's available within that community, within that particular context. So I'm gonna go for a national scope again. If I am in a place that's been historically pretty um, stable, I'm gonna pick Cincinnati, which is where I live, um, as an example. Um, the energy the energy load required here might be much higher than it would be in some other places, because there's a certain inertia that sets
exactly?
in. And the challenge that we have in Cincinnati, which is the opposite of the challenge that you have in Las Vegas, which has been one of the reasons why Las Vegas has been fascinating to me, is that Cincinnati is chock a block with organizations that are trying in some shape, fashion, and form to address entrepreneurship, innovation, small business development, all of this stuff. And some in some it's not quite so bad now, but a few years ago, they were tripping over each other. They were literally sort of fighting for the scraps. And I am vice chair of one of those organizations. And we would look at what was coming out of some other organizations and just say, that's a load of hooey. There's no way they can do that. And invariably they didn't, but you get the press for saying you can do the great thing.
Right.
If you quietly slip away, not so much. So in that case, moving the ecosystem involved not only, the work of building new pieces and building relationships and building connections, but it required the work of undoing this, I am an island and I'm going to fight for everything I can get for me, myself, and I, regardless of the fact that we're all supposedly, working to solve the same question.
Right.
And I know you've got some, sense of, there's the challenge in Las Vegas is a little bit different. Part of it's coming from what I understand at this point, and I'm just now beginning to reconnect back in. You've got some people who are coming in with, I would argue, unrealistic expectations. But you also have like holes. Like if I think of that ecosystem and I think of it, and I've been trying to design this, but as a matrix of those pumps and pipes and how they connect to each other. In Cincinnati, there are very few missing pumps. There's a lot of missing pipes, but there are very few missing pumps. In Las Vegas, because there's just fewer nonprofit type organizations or social benefit type organizations, particularly focused on this issue. I don't know if there's like if when we start doing that analysis, if we'll find pumps in certain categories at all. I mean, is there in a place like Cincinnati, there are 5 different organizations that are trying to be the switchboard operator, the one who sends people and you need to go talk to these guys and you need to go talk to those guys because that's a very
Right.
powerful situation. In Las Vegas, I don't know that you have that at all at this point.
I think you're right, but I also think we have at least two substantial issues along those lines, which is one, the insular communities and the associated services mean you don't always know what you don't know. So you don't know that they're like, oh, you guys have the same problem. Oh, you're already addressing it. During the downtown project, Tony hired someone, her name's Meredith Spriggs, to be the guru of homelessness, I guess, to try to address the people that were being pushed out of the various low cost apartments and hotels that were either squatting or they were living there temporarily or whatever, what have you. So that was actually on the list of considerations. And I'm sure from what I understand that there are resources to tackle homelessness in Las Vegas, but it's the connection and the communication and the awareness that sort of breaks down, and you have people living in steam tunnels and on the street. And so I think there's a coordination issue. So as you say, the switchboard and just global awareness, global in our locality, but everybody should know that it's not, oh, it's just no, it's actually a problem that could be solved.
Yes.
And then also is this is a culture thing, I think, just from my travels. There are cultures that are very, you have to know the person and shake their hand. And then there are cultures that are early adopters in the super connecting networks, like, contact this person. And here's another, but here it's definitely, I can name the names, make sure you go talk to Josh. He knows the right, go talk to Jamie Schwartz at the university. Those two names come up every day. I told Jamie while she's traveling, I said, there are people telling me on a Saturday that I need to go find you to get the right person to talk to. And that doesn't scale well. So
Yeah.
So our insular communities definitely need to, and in fact, another person at our roundtable, Sammy, on Thursday
Mhm.
was asking people at this event. I have a pitch workout room to pitch ideas.
Mhm.
She said, "How did you get here? What brought you to this event tonight? Like, where did the chain start?" And it started at Tech Alley, or it started with somebody mentioned it to somebody else. But we have a network of one to one communications here, which
Mhm.
is difficult to scale in this modern era. So we need to learn how to adopt better communications and information sharing, and I call it discovery. So yeah, I think your point about pipes and pumps and some missing pieces is accurate.
Mhm. Yeah, but it is going to be different for each
Oh
place.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
Well, that's the take
mhm.
home, is that each place is different, and you cannot simply like come in with a bunch of pumps and start installing them. You're like, wait, which does this pump fit that pipe?
Yeah.
And there's this sense, and I now my message is, hey, Silicon Valley is going to be the next Las Vegas, and people think that's like, nah, scoffing at it. Well, Las Vegas can't be the next Silicon Valley either. It can be a better Las Vegas, and that's true of any. Detroit can't be Las Vegas, and Las Vegas
Yeah.
can't be Detroit. And you see what
Well,
happened
great.
when
I'm
you relied
so
completely
glad to
on an
hear that.
industry. Yep.
Yeah. Awesome. Awesome. I'm glad to hear you saying that.
I will say it over and over until people get
Good.
sick of it, because a lot of people are chanting, "We'll be the next tech hub, and it's going to blow." And I think some tempered realism, and really the take home is the culture of Silicon Valley started in the 50s at Stanford.
Hmm.
Really, the
Hmm.
culture of Las Vegas started in the 30s with the mob.
Yeah.
Probably some of my family from New Jersey. But the
Yeah.
fact is, we've grown up and established our ecosystems, and our climax communities are very different. And as you said earlier, the downtown projects, what remains there, it tends to be the restaurants and the retail outlets and the
Hmm.
hospitality and service industries. The
Hmm.
tech sort of meandered away, and by the way, what happened to the successful tech startups that were in the downtown project? What happened when they crossed over into success?
They
They
all, they
moved.
all, they all moved, right? Or
Right. You got to
most
come to Sand Hill Road in Silicon Valley. That's where the money is.
did.
And we want you to be closer to us. So this was a farm team, if you will, or, so the culture fit, and how to change that, it takes more than one person with some good ideas and some best intentions, I think. So it'll be an
Absolutely.
interesting thing. I know we're going pretty, I don't know how much more time we have. So I definitely want
Hmm.
to touch though on, I saw you posted, I didn't even read it yet, but on LinkedIn, um, electricity, power, and access to it. And it's part of a larger resource equity,
Hmm.
which people don't think about also, which I happen to be interested in for our open data capture platform that we're working on for Innovate for Vegas. So
Hmm.
actually recognizing different geographical and demographical uh, disparities and
Yeah.
connecting those, and using the open data framework, actually making those visible and analyzable. Um,
I'm so glad you're doing that. I think open data is going to end up being, in the entire universe of open data, is going to end up being the incredible transformation of this era. And we too easily overlook just the power and the capability of what we can do
sure,
at this
if you
point.
know,
If
knowing
you
is
know.
half the battle and the other half. So, but there, I mean, the White House is driving a data equity program, which I hope that we can, kind of participate in fully as we get more people going, oh, I see how this works,
Mhm.
volunteering for the betterment of our locality. But I always drop her name because it's I don't really know a lot of famous people, but my in junior high school I went to school with Denise. Now currently it's chief data scientist of the United States, Denise Ross, and she is a
Awesome.
big proponent of open data and using data equity approaches to equal access to things. And so the energy stuff is completely um, apropos today here in Vegas,
Yeah.
because the access to water being what it is changing the access to electricity,
Mm-hmm.
because generation has to switch more to natural gas, which the price of natural gas is up. So it depends on
Mm-hmm.
which areas have access to what. And it just, the list goes on and on. And then it goes to the internet access with cable and
Mm-hmm.
access to transit. Our transit system is completely crazy when it comes to route planning, and
Mm-hmm.
where people actually live. And I could go on and on and on, but not having data makes it. Uh, the example I always give is, I'm sure you've well, anywhere you go shopping in a downtown shopping district.
Mm-hmm.
But coming from back east, we would go to New York to where, in
Yep.
Manhattan probably.
Yep.
You go to one electronics store or clothing store or whatever, and they'll give you a price. And you go to a store down the street or across 2 blocks over, and you get a different price. And then they want to
Yep.
haggle with you. But if you know all of the prices, then there's no more haggling. There's no more game playing. There's
Yeah.
no more. So perfect information, as it's called, is makes things very different, and
Absolutely.
it helps to
Yeah.
argue against things like what's wrong, what's gentrification is good, which I have
Yeah.
heard here.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. That's a conversation for another day.
but we can have a part 2 and 3 probably. But so I don't know how much more time we're coming up on an hour and a half, but I definitely
Yeah.
wanted to. So first of all, so we can save the downtown project deep dive for another episode if
Right.
you'll have me. But
Absolutely.
I definitely want to touch on the playbook plan, which Las Vegas will ideally be a part of as it moves forward.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'll very quickly run down some of the stuff that we're doing here to try
Awesome.
to fit into that.
Cool.
Sounds good?
So the playbook idea, and we're probably going to change the name on it because there's too many playbooks running around out there. The playbook, the ecosystem playbook concept actually came from a gentleman named John Owen, who is the um, he is the, to use the term I just used, he's sort of the he's sort of the switchboard operator for the Dayton, Ohio ecosystem. So for those of your folks who aren't familiar with the Midwest, Dayton is a metro area of probably 250,000, so it's fairly small. It is an hour north of Cincinnati and probably an hour and a half from Columbus, Ohio. So it's not right next to a larger city, but it's kind of within striking distance. Um, Dayton is in a lot of respects a quintessential Rust Belt city. Um, so it was a city that it was the home of National Cash Register, and um, and a lot of other kind of big 20th century industrial operations. AC Delco. So some of the older folks might know some of these names. Um, Dayton crashed hard, like the rest of the Rust Belt, and is in kind of rough shape these days. There is an organization called Launch Dayton that John is sort of the head guy for, that includes a bunch of largely nonprofits and largely sort of more traditional nonprofits. So there's some community foundations and a social services agency and a couple of universities and so on and so on, who are part of this consortium, um, who said that we want to work on entrepreneurship. We want to build up entrepreneurship in our community. And their particular goal was, we want to have minority entrepreneurs in this community at the benchmark they set was the same percentage of entrepreneurs being in this community. Minority predominantly means Black, as majority population. City of Dayton's about 50-50 African American and white. We want to hit that threshold. We're a long way off. The challenge in Dayton is that none of those organizations, or very few of them, come out of an entrepreneurial background. So they're like, we see a problem, we want to try to solve it, but I think if they were totally honest with you, they would say, we don't really know how to do this. So I came to John as I was trying to figure out what to do with that Everybody Innovates Here book. I wrote it. I worked on some stuff. I was getting ready to put a big push on it. Pandemic happens, right? That's kind of everybody's story these days. What John identified was that if we could pull together some other cities in addition to Dayton and look at how that framework might be applied in a different context, different kinds of places, that would be potentially something that national funders would be interested in, particularly nonprofit foundations at the national level who are focused on entrepreneurship. So, and on inclusive entrepreneurship, particularly. So, just based on my connections and people and communities that I knew and trusted, we pulled together a group of four. One is Dayton, one is the U.S. Virgin Islands. That's the only that's the only kind of standard economic development organization as a lead entity in this group. One was obviously Las Vegas, because why would it not be? And one is Asheville, North Carolina. And so all of those were organizations that, were trying to answer these questions about entrepreneurship and inclusion, and doing some good stuff and making some good strides, but struggling with, how do we do this in a comprehensive manner? So the game plan, and we're shopping this to funders right now. So if any of your listeners have deep pockets or a direct line to the Ford Foundation, let me know. What we're proposing is basically to draw on the Trep House network of Black founders and kind of do a deep dive into each of these four communities, interview entrepreneurs, really learn and understand the organizations and the people in these communities, and then kind of map out what's going on in each of these communities, what might be good ideas to do to kind of fill out that ecosystem. And ultimately, the hope, this is where the playbook part comes in, is from the experience of those communities, be able to say, okay, it looks like these are common gaps to look for. These are ways that you can fill that gap, and basically take the learnings of those four communities and accelerate entrepreneurship everywhere. That's really the ultimate goal.
Right.
And we're still,
So,
just to be clear, we're very much in the early, we've got a concept. I'm starting to pitch it to national partners, and we're just at the beginning.
the beginning of the beginning, to be
Yes, indeed.
Churchillian. But so our part, and I don't know if we kind of touched on this early in our emails and early discussions, but it really hadn't kind of come together. But for our part, people here, because this entire thing, the Cafe Genius project, which is the juxtaposition of the Cafe Centro coffee shop in San Francisco, where startups came to start,
Mm-hmm.
or whatever their moniker was, and the Genius Lunch, which we used to have during the downtown project days, when we just hang out at lunchtime and talk about who's doing
Oh,
what and
yes.
whatnot. So I figured I need a name for the pitch workout room. So Cafe Genius, here it is. And so now it has added on, because the pitch workout room is good for getting people to start their journey of entrepreneurialism, talk about your
Mm-hmm.
idea. Those have been pretty successful given their very simple nature. And I said,
Great.
we should have a roundtable of entrepreneurs that are on the ground, that are really doing stuff, and talk about some things that I thought were problems during the downtown project. I call it
Mm-hmm.
the last mile. So we have that discussion going on. Matthew, who you know, is our data scientist. He's come up with our metrics. So we
I
have
love Matthew.
we've consolidated three. He's taken classes and teaching classes, and he's all over the place. But he took on the metrics. We have three general areas: the ecosystem itself, the shape, the makeup, the good, the bad, the metrics that we'll use to measure those things over time, and the strategy
Mm-hmm.
we will employ to drive the indicators in a positive direction. What that actually means is possibly up for discussion.
Uh-huh.
So the roundtable, and then the downtown project retrospective, which I hope you will be a part of in some way,
Yeah.
is just going to be a survey of people who were part of, or spectators, or who have opinions and insights,
Mm-hmm.
to see what worked and what didn't back then and what can we apply now. We could use the same metrics and whatnot. So there's a lot of things we have moving here, and we too are just getting started. We started in
Yep.
January, so it's really very new, but we hope to connect all this stuff with what you are working on so that
Mhm.
it becomes a we project.
Yeah, I'm
And
super
then
excited
as
about that.
and we have other, like the Trep House. If you look at their website and you listen to me or some of the other people at the roundtable and our discussions about the things that we everybody going back to the, oh, just go talk to Jamie, go talk to Josh, and then the other one is
Mhm.
go to the SBDC office or go to SCORE,
Yeah.
and those are great at a certain point. But if you're just getting started, they have no idea how to help you. And I had this
Oh,
discussion
yeah.
with SBDC. So we're talking about, like, you need something between I just got here and my suitcases are right here, and okay, now I'm going to go to the SBDC and talk to them. So between
Yeah.
there's a whole mile, that last mile of I
Oh,
need a
yeah.
place to live. I need to know who to talk to. I don't even know what's going on.
Mhm.
And so that has actually gotten a positive reception. So there's
Oh,
hopefully
awesome.
through
Yeah.
the year we'll have, and when we do part two, because clearly 90 minutes was not enough, 95 even. But yeah, there will be more to talk about. Surely, I'm not trying to rush, but I know it's been a long. We're
Mhm.
talking a lot. People are listening a lot. I'm sure everybody's hanging on though. Thank you. But yeah, I think there's just going to be a tremendous amount, probably in another couple months if you have
Oh,
time.
that's awesome. I am
but
so excited to see. Yeah, I
or
can't
whenever
wait.
or whenever you want. Yeah, whenever you want. But yeah, me too. I mean, I would. So often as an engineer, people will ask me, why are you even doing this? Because I want to see if it'll
Mhm.
work. I mean,
That's the classic engineer answer.
but
Perfect.
but how are you going to monetize that? Volume? I don't know.
Yeah.
So it'd be
Yeah.
interesting to see if we can affect a positive change and we can actually measure it. And it has been. I will tell you, anybody out there looking to do something, if you proactively get smart people to join you on something, like our Genius
Uh-huh.
Roundtable is aptly named, um, the the discussion and the motivation, but the drive to actually do, when I ran into Matthew before our second cohort meeting, and he said, "Oh, I'm still working on my homework." So and I'm like, "Wow,
Oh,
it's cool that people are not waiting till the last minute, right?" So you're getting people that are actually interested in what we're doing, and
oh
so I
yeah, and
envision them,
motivated.
right, and I envision that these will be our EIRs for our ecosystem
Hmm.
moving forward, right? Because there are
That's
no
awesome.
entrepreneurs in residence to point people in the right direction. We have somebody in the veteran community. We have a native Las Vegan. We
Oh, cool.
have
Good.
a strategy consultant. We have a data scientist. So we have people with legitimate interest and actual interestingness to bring to bear on this.
Hmm.
So it's been pretty exciting. So
That's
we'll see. Well,
wonderful.
when we next talk, we'll both have more to say about our respective projects and how they're going to intersect.
Well,
And
hopefully.
we'll totally dive into the downtown project more, because hopefully we'll have some retrospective feedback by then.
Oh, that'd be awesome. And I'm thrilled to participate. You know, I would talk to you all day. I would talk about Las Vegas all day. Yeah, I can go on this stuff for hours. And unfortunately, I'm probably doing that. So,
I can
yeah.
talk for longer than you can. Is that a bet? Is that a wager? A
I
challenge?
don't think I should take that bet. Sorry, that was perfect. Yeah.
I'm here all
No,
week. Tip your server.
all
Or open
right.
mic. Sorry.
Absolutely. I'm on deck. You just let me know.
All right. Well, I think both of us have tons of stuff to do. So if we talk more than we do, then we'll have nothing to talk about eventually,
Amen.
after a few
Yep.
years. But yeah, I definitely want to, like, some sort of an update when we both have some. I mean, things are happening all the time, but I don't want to.
Right.
I think there's some deep diving to do on the downtown project specifically, and then,
Mhm.
to be frank, and then we don't have to go too much today, but when we had our meetup of your group on the
Mhm.
playbook project, I believe Stephanie, is that her name? I don't remember her last name,
Oh yes.
in
Asheville.
in yeah, Asheville. Um, she had a really interesting idea about financing for startups
Mhm.
and how to make that work, and I thought that would be interesting for Evelyn to hear about for the housing
Oh
stuff
yeah.
here. So there's a lot of cross pollination already in mind. So yeah,
Good
that will
deal.
only continue. So
Good deal. If there's one thing I can do, it's take. one person's good ideas and tell somebody else about that person's good ideas. That's the benefit. I don't always have my own good ideas, but I can crib them from somebody else any day of the week.
Sure. And I've been telling people, and this I believe this will be true. All of my geniuses at my roundtable, they're all contributing with their names attached. So hopefully they'll all get a little bit of fame, and not fortune perhaps, but some fame. I'm like I said, I've been very impressed and even a little excited about the participation and the the insights and so on. So I think there'll be some real value over time. So that's kind of been cool
Awesome.
so far. So
Awesome. Good to hear.
all right.
All right.
That is 100 minutes and 27 seconds that I see on my clock here. So that's a good run. Possibly
Yeah.
setting the bar for everybody else into the future,
Sorry.
but no. I think there's a lot to talk about. If this
Yeah.
isn't one of the most interesting topics in any city, like the future of how people will survive, that seems like a good topic to discuss and spend some time on. So
Kind of
I know
important.
it's crazy,
Yeah. Cool.
but I thank you very much, Della Rucker, for your time, and I look forward to part 2 and 3.
All right.
And
Well, you
be sure and come and see us. Come and see us when you're out.
I'm trying to figure out how to get that done.
Bring the kids to Area 15. The Omega Mart is as cool as they say it is. I promise. It's pretty cool.
Yep.
So
Yep. They yeah. That would be interesting to do. Cool. All righty. You
all
take
right.
care.
All right. Talk to you later.
Sure. See ya.
Bye bye.